Hello students, welcome to KENE'S Educare, a group of KENE solutions. This is part 2 of lesson number 6, tissues. Okay, so in the last part, I have given you a brief introduction on what we are going to study in this lesson, and I have even introduced you with the lesson by showing you all the screens, like what exactly is there, and I have given you certain notes which you need to have it with you because you will be preparing for your entrance as well. So the topics that have been given in this lesson, like they have given you everything, but the classification and all, they have not explained it that much. So that is the reason I have only just written the names. I have not explained you what are the different types of epithelial tissue. I have not explained you that, but instead I have given you the name so that you know at least how it has been classified. Okay, so we have two different types of tissues. एक होता है plant tissue, एक होता है animal tissue. Okay, now plant tissue जो है that is further divided into two type. एक होता है meristematic tissue और एक होता है permanent tissue. Okay, so meristematic and permanent tissue, they are further divided later. So in this lesson we are going to discuss about the plant tissue, that is we are going to discuss on meristematic tissue, and secondly we are going to discuss on this permanent tissue. Okay, so after discussing on this plant tissue, we have animal tissue to discuss, where we have already seen that animal tissues are of four types. Firstly, we have epidermal tissue, you can say. Secondly, we have muscular tissue, we have connective tissue, and nervous tissue. So these are the four different types of tissues which are present in animal. Okay, so only this much we have to study in this lesson. So the basic aim of this lesson tissue is to make you understand about the different types of tissues which are present in animal and in plants as well. Okay, because last lesson jo tha, the fundamental unit of life, that was completely based on the cell, right? So you saw that how is the cell, they have been related to the fundamental unit of life, because cell is the structural and functional unit of life. And when a group of group of cell come together, but the cell with the group of cell, it should have similar structure and it should have similar function as well, then we call that group of cell as tissue, right? So tissue is what? Tissue is a group of cell having similar function as well as similar structure. Okay, so in this lesson, as I told you, we are only going to discuss on the plant tissue and the animal tissue, right? So I hope you're clear whatever we have discussed in the last class. हमने last class में discuss किया था about tissues and all. तो इस part में we are going to discuss on your lesson. Like we will try to complete with the plant tissue part, because plant tissue ज़्यादा नहीं है. We just have meristematic tissue and permanent tissue to discuss on. Okay. So let's see if we can complete till here today, and ताकि हम next part में animal tissue continue कर सकें. Okay. So see, what exactly a tissue is. So tissue is a group of cells having similar structure and function. तो जब एक group of cell आते हैं, and in that group of cell, all the cells, they have similar structure as well as they have the similar function which they are performing, then that group of cell together, they are going to form the tissue. Okay, so in plants and animals group of cells called tissues, they carry out specific function. तो अभी जो plant और animal group है हमारे पास, या जो group of cells which are present in the plant and animal, they have certain functions to carry out. Okay, so they carry out certain specific functions. For example, in human being, the cell of the muscular tissue that contract and relax, and that helps in the movement. Now why we human beings are able to like, how is our body able to move, how it is moving, what are the thing that is helping us in moving our body? So it is because our muscular tissue is contracting and relaxing, that is helping in movement of our body, right? And that is how we human beings have been helped. एंड हमेशा याद रखो जो हमारे मस्कुलर टिश्यूज़ हैं, दे आर कॉन्ट्रैक्टिंग एंड रिलैक्सिंग. क्या हो रहा है मस्कुलर टिश्यू में? दे आर कॉन्ट्रैक्टिंग एंड रिलैक्सिंग, एंड दैट इज़ हाउ आर the human beings are able to move. Okay, so in plants, the cells of the vascular tissue, now plants के अंदर क्या है? In plants we have this vascular tissue that conduct water and food. So we have two different types of vascular tissue in plants. The first one is xylem and the second one is phloem. So these are two important vascular tissue. Okay, so xylem जो है that conducts water in plant and phloem conducts water. Okay, तो xylem and phloem is one such thing जो आप you might have came across while you were discussing on photosynthesis. Because अगर plants को पानी चाहिए, so they are going to call this vascular tissue called as xylem. Okay, and अगर plants को food चाहिए, because plants also need the food in all the parts of all the different parts that the plants are having, right? So that time the plants are going to call this phloem part. Okay. So in plants, this vascular tissue, xylem and phloem, they help in conducting the water and food from one part of the plant to the other part. Okay, so कौन help कर रहा है plants में? Vascular tissue, that is xylem and phloem, they are going to help in conducting the water and food from one part of the plant to another. Now this is the plant tissue which has been shown, and this is the animal tissue which has been shown. What the question is, are the plants and animals they made of the same type of tissue? ये जो plant और animal tissue है, are they made up of same type of tissue, or there are different types of tissues which are making this animal and plant tissues? Okay, so now there are some noticeable differences which we can see between the plant tissue and the animal tissue, right? So plants, they are stationary or they are fixed. It means plants में जो tissue है, they don't move, they are stationary, they are fixed. But if you can see the animal tissue there, they are moving, they are locomoting, right? And we have already discussed why the plants don't move, because they are making their own food through the process of photosynthesis. So they don't have to find food, they don't have to find their shelter and all. But in case of animals, what happens? Animals जो है, they have to move from one place to another in search of food, in searching their mates as well as shelter, right? So as we were talking on the plant tissue, that अगर आप plants को देखोगे, then these plants, they are stationary, it means they are fixed, that is they are not moving, right? And since they have to be upright, because they are not moving, they have to be upright, they have a large quantity of supportive tissue. तो plant tissue के पास क्या है? They have large quantity of supportive tissue which is present, and this supportive tissue, it generally has dead cells. ठीक है, plant tissue के पास क्या है? supportive tissue है, and supportive tissue के पास क्या होता है? Supportive tissue has dead cells which are present there. Okay, and animals, if you see, animals on the other hand, they move from one place to another in searching the food, mate and shelter, right? Animals क्या करते हैं? एक जगह से दूसरी जगह जाते रहते हैं. Why? Because they have to search the food, their mates and the shelter as well, right? So animals are going to consume more energy as compared to plants, because plants को तो move नहीं करना, plants को एक जगह से दूसरी जगह नहीं जाना, right? But animals have to move from one place to another. Why animals have to move? In search of their food, in search of mates as well as shelter, right? So animals are going to consume more energy as compared to plants, and most of the tissues that the animals have, they are all living. Okay, so जो animal tissue होते हैं, what are they living or they non-living? They are living type of tissues which are present in animal. Okay, see, another difference that we can see between the plant and the animal is the pattern of growth. How are they growing? That is also one of the pattern you can see that exists between the plant tissue and the animal tissue. Okay, सो द ग्रोथ इन प्लांट, अभी प्लांट का ग्रोथ जो है वो एक लिमिटेड, एक सर्टन रीजन तक लिमिटेड होता है, पर एनिमल्स में कोई रीजन नहीं होता कि एनिमल सिर्फ ये रीजन तक ग्रो करेंगे या यहाँ तक ही ग्रो करेंगे. सो दिस काइंड ऑफ ग्रोथ पैटर्न इज नॉट सीन इन एनिमल्स, which is seen in growth, which is seen in the plants. Okay, now there are some tissues in plant that divide throughout their life. अब प्लांट्स के अंदर कुछ ऐसे टिश्यूज होते हैं जो अपने पूरी लाइफ टाइम डिवाइड करते हैं. till they are existing, till they are having life, the tissues in the plant, they are going to divide. Okay, and these tissues in the plant, they are localized in certain region. कहाँ पे होता है ये ऐसा tissue plants में? They are going to be localized in certain region, and based on the dividing capacity the tissue is having, because each and everything around us have some or the other kind of capacity that they are having, right? So based on the dividing capacity the tissue has, various plant tissues, we can classify them as meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. Now I have already introduced you all with this, that we have two different types of plant tissue. एक होता है मेरिस्टेमेटिक टिश्यू, एक होता है परमानेंट टिश्यू. तो मेरिस्टेमेटिक टिश्यू इज ऑल्सो कॉल्ड एज द ग्रोइंग टिश्यू. ओके, तो प्लांट टिश्यू इज डिवाइडेड इनटू मेरिस्टेमेटिक टिश्यू एंड परमानेंट टिश्यू. ओके, एंड इफ वी सी द ग्रोथ पैटर्न इन एनिमल्स, तो सेल ग्रोथ इन एनिमल्स इज गोइंग टू बी मोर यूनिफॉर्म. सेल ग्रोथ कैसा होगा एनिमल्स के अंदर? इट इज गोइंग टू बी मोर यूनिफॉर्म. So there is no such demarcation of dividing and non-dividing regions in animal. Now because the cell growth in animals जो है that is more uniform, and that is the reason we can say that वहाँ पे there is no such demarcation which exists with respect to dividing and non-dividing regions in animals. ठीक है, तो animals के अंदर ऐसा नहीं होता कि dividing region है, non-dividing region है. There is no such reason. And the structural organization of the organs and the organ system, ठीक है, ऑर्गन और ऑर्गन सिस्टम का जो स्ट्रक्चरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन होता है दैट इज फार मोर स्पेशलाइज्ड एंड लोकलाइज्ड इन कॉम्प्लेक्स एनिमल. तो अगर हम कॉम्प्लेक्स एनिमल्स को देखेंगे तो कॉम्प्लेक्स एनिमल के अंदर जो स्ट्रक्चरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन होता है, उनके ऑर्गन्स कैसे हैं, उनका ऑर्गन सिस्टम कैसे फंक्शन कर रहा है, दे आर गोइंग टू हैव अ स्पेशलाइज्ड ऑर्गन एंड स्पेशलाइज्ड ऑर्गन सिस्टम विच इज प्रेजेंट विद इन देम. एंड दिस सेम थिंग अकर्स विद द complex plants as well. Okay, so this fundamental difference, it reflects the different modes of life. तो ये जो fundamental difference हमें देखने मिल रहा है, that is telling us a lot of things, that is reflecting the different mode of life which is existing there, right? So this reflects the different mode of life which exists, which has been pursued by the two major groups of organism, and this is particularly in the different feeding method. How it is in different feeding methods that different organisms go on with. Okay, so also they are differently adapted for a sedentary existence on one hand. Now when you see plants and animals, you will see that they are sedentary, like they have, like plants have a sedentary existence, वो एक ही जगह पर रहते हैं, and that is what we call it as a sedentary existence. But animals के केस में क्या होता है, they show active locomotion where we are contributing to this difference in the organ system design as well, right? Because animals में they have different active locomotion, so यहाँ से वहाँ जाते रहते हैं in search of food, mate and shelter, so they are moving from one place to another, and this is also one of the difference that exists between plants and animals. And because of the locomotion that they are having, इसके वजह से क्या होता है, this kind of locomotion जो है that leads to animals जो होते हैं they consume more energy than the plants. because they do some kind of work of locomoting from one place to another, right? So वहाँ पे the animals are using extra energy, right? So it is with reference to this complex animals and plant bodies that we will now talk about the concepts of tissues in some detail. Now, as we are having this complex plants and complex animal bodies together, now we are going to discuss in detail, that is the concept of tissue. Okay, and what is tissue? You are aware of what is tissue now? Tissue जो है, tissue when a group of cell is coming together, okay, क्या हो रहा है? Group of cell is coming together and that group of cell should be structurally and functionally similar to each other, okay? Then we can say that group of cell जो है, they are going to form a tissue, okay? See, first of all, today we are going to discuss on the plant tissue, okay? And we already know that we have two different types of plant tissue. First is meristematic tissue and the second one is the permanent tissue, right? So growth of plants, it occurs only in a certain specific region. आपको पता है जो प्लांट का ग्रोथ है वो एक स्पेसिफिक रीजन में होता है, ऐसा नहीं है कि पूरा का पूरा प्लांट ग्रो होता है, नो. The growth of the plant that occurs only in a certain specific region and this is because of the dividing tissue which is present within them. ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है? Because of the dividing tissue which is present, and this dividing tissue we also know it as meristematic tissue which is present, okay? And ये meristematic tissue जो है that is located only at this points, and where we have this dividing tissue which we also call it as the meristematic tissue, you will see that the plants are going to grow in that specific region only, okay? So depending on the region where they are present, this meristematic tissue, they are classified as apical tissue, lateral meristematic tissue and intercalary meristematic tissue. Can you see? Apical meristematic tissue is present on the top, intercalary meristematic tissue is present in the center, you can say, and lateral meristematic tissue is present on the lateral side, okay? So see, depending on what? Depending on the region where they are present, we have three different types of meristematic tissue. We have apical meristematic tissue, we have intercalary meristematic tissue, and lastly we have lateral meristematic tissue, okay? So now the new cells which are produced by meristem, they are initially like those of meristem itself. अभी जो भी new cells produce होते हैं because of this meristem, or when this meristems are producing new types of cells, initially you will see that they look exactly similar to each other, okay? They look exactly similar like the meristem itself, but as they grow and they mature, their characteristics slowly change and they become differentiated as the component of other tissue. तो जब मेरिस्टेम नया टिश्यू like produce करता है, at that time you will see that they will grow and mature like the meristem itself. But later what happens? Slowly their characteristics are going to change and you will see that they will be differentiated as components of other tissue. ठीक है? The new cells, they are further going to get differentiated as what? Components of other tissue by slowly changing and by differentiating as an component of other tissue, okay? So cells of meristematic tissue, they are very active because they have dense cytoplasm, thin cellulose wall and a prominent nuclei. तो meristematic tissue के जो cells होते हैं वो बहुत ज़्यादा active होंगे. Why? Active क्यों है इनके cells? Because they are having dense cytoplasm, thin cellulose wall and also they have a prominent nuclei which has been present, okay? But meristematic tissue के cells, they are going to lack this vacuole. Now you know what vacuole is. We have studied vacuole is a component of cell that we have, right? So this meristematic tissue, they lack vacuole, and can we think why they will lack vacuole? What will be the reason that this meristematic cells, they lack vacuole? So for that we can refer to the function of vacuoles in the chapter, that is we can refer to the 5th lesson fundamental unit of life. There we have discussed that the cell is the structural and functional unit of life, right? Now this meristematic tissue, they lack vacuoles. Now we have certain activities to perform here. Now onion peel wala activity was there in the last class, in the last part, and now it is there in this part itself. Okay, let's see, but here it will be little different. Okay, see what is the activity given. You need to take 2 glass jar. क्या लोगे आप? See, this is jar 1, jar 2. तो आपने 2 glass jar लिए. You have to fill that with water. Now take 2 onion bulb and place one on each jar as shown. Now you have to take an onion bulb and आपको दोनों glass jar पे रखना है. ठीक है? Easy one, इतना कर सकते हैं. Now observe the growth of root in both the bulb for few days. क्या करोगे आप? अब दोनों बल्ब में आप देखोगे ग्रोथ ऑब्जर्व करना है आपको. ठीक है? आफ्टर 3 days व्हाट यू आर गोइंग टू डू इज, आपको रोज रोज क्या करना है, ये जो रूट ग्रो कर रहा है ना पानी के अंदर, यू हैव टू मेजर द लेंथ ऑफ द रूट दैट इज ग्रोइंग ऑन day 1, day 2 and day 3. And on day 4 what are you going to do is, you are going to cut the root tip of the onion bulb in the jar 2 by about 1 centimeter. तो आपने डे 1 पे क्या किया, आपने उसका रूट मेजर किया. डे 2 पे फिर से आपने उसका लेंथ ऑफ द रूट मेजर किया. डे 3 पे फिर से आप उसका लेंथ मेजर कर रहे हो. पर अब आप डे 4 पे क्या करोगे, आप जो उसका रूट टिप, अनियन बल्ब का रूट टिप कट करोगे जार 2 वाले का बाय 1 सेंटीमीटर. ओके, आपने क्या किया, जार 2 के अंदर जो अनियन बल्ब है उसका आप रूट टिप कट कर दोगे बाय 1 सेंटीमीटर. ओके, after this observe the growth of the root in both the jars and measure the length each day for 5 more days and record the observation in the table given below. ठीक है, आपको 5 दिन के लिए करना है. अभी आपने क्या किया था, जो आपका जार 2 है उसमें से उसका आपने रूट टिप कट कर दिया था 1 सेंटीमीटर, राइट. नाउ आप 5 days तक ऑब्जर्व करो एंड फाइंड इट आउट कि व्हाट एग्जैक्टली हैपेंस. एंड आई वांट ईच वन ऑफ यू to follow this, like each one of you to do this experiment and find out the result which occurs for this 5 days. Okay, so from the above observation answer the following question. Now for y'all I have already done this. Okay, so let me tell you what happens here is, first question given is what, which of the 2 onion has longer roots and why. So I'll tell you what happens here exactly is, see, growth क्यों होता है plants में. As I told you that growth in the plant occurs in specific regions only, and these regions can be 3. It can be an apical region, lateral region or an intercalary region, because we have lateral meristematic tissue, we have intercalary meristematic tissue and we have lateral meristematic tissue, right. So the growth are going to take place in any of these 3 regions. Now all the 3 regions that we have, they contain a fast dividing cell group. ठीक है, ये जो हमने 3 region देखे हैं, this is the apical meristematic region, intercalary and lateral. All these 3 regions, they are going to have fast dividing cell group which we call it as meristematic tissue. Okay, and when we cut the onion root tip, ये जो apical meristem है, they are cut off. जब आप जार 2 का 1 सेंटीमीटर का रूट हेयर कट करते हो, व्हाट हैपेंस, आपने उसका एपिकल मेरिस्टेम कट कर दिया है. ओके, सो नाउ द एपिकल मेरिस्टेम जो है, दैट इज द मेन डिवाइडिंग टिश्यू इन द रूट एंड द शूट which is going to which increases the length. Okay, as a result आप देखोगे because you have cutted the apical meristem, you will see that the growth of the root is stopped in the root. Okay, so jar 2 में आप देखोगे because you have cut the apical meristem, you have cut the onion bulb by 1 centimeter, इसका मतलब आपने apical meristem को cut कर दिया है. So here in jar 2 the growth will be stopped. Okay, and secondly what has been written, do the root continue growing even after we have removed the tip? No. So why will the tip stop growing in the jar? Because you have cutted the apical meristem which is responsible for increasing the length of the root. Okay, now what can be the inference that we can give from this? So here we see that the root grows only at the tip. Root कहाँ पे grow करता है onion में? Root only, like you can say the root grows only at the tip. So this indicates that the part of a plant which grows, it grows only at a specific place. यहाँ से ही plant grow कर रहा है root hair से ही, right? So it is growing at a specific place only. And if we observe all parts of the plant we see, the root tip cause the root elongation. Root का tip क्या करता है? Root का elongation करता है. Shoot tip is going to cause shoot elongation. The lateral sides of the stem and the roots that we are having, it is going to increase the thickness of the root and the stem. ठीक है, lateral side क्या करेगा stem और roots का? वो रूट और स्टेम का थिकनेस इंक्रीज करेगा. एंड सिमिलरली द लैटरल साइड ऑफ द लीफ इज गोइंग टू ग्रो एंड इट इज गोइंग टू मेक अ लीफ बिग इन साइज. आई होप यू हैव अंडरस्टूड कि आप जब जार 2 को कट करते हो बाय 1 सेंटीमीटर, you cut the apical meristem of the onion bulb, and once the apical meristem is cutted, it is going to stop growing. Okay, so it is not going to grow. Okay, so the plant is not going to grow here and the growth will be stopped here. Okay, so apical meristem is one of the important part that we have, but still I want you to, because this is a simple experiment, you can do this at your house, right? So I want you all to do this experiment. Measure the length of the root hair day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 and day 5, and you can conclude your own conclusion and inference out of it. Okay, now this was about the meristematic tissue. Meristematic tissue के 3 types क्या है? We have apical meristematic tissue which is present at the tip, intercalary meristem which is present at the base, and lateral meristem which is present laterally. Okay, so this is the location of meristematic tissue in the plant body. So whenever you are writing an answer on this meristematic tissue, drawing this location of meristematic in the plant body is very important, as it itself has some major points which have been given according to the marks. Okay, now this is the permanent tissue that we have. Now if you can see, here we have one guard cell, we have stoma, we have cytoplasm which is present, we have cell wall, nucleus, vacuole and chloroplast which are all present here, right? So what happens to the cell which are formed by the meristematic tissue? Now the cells are going to take up a specific role and they are going to lose the ability to divide, and that is the reason the meristematic tissue के जो cells थे, they are going to now become the permanent tissue. Getting my point? The cells which are formed by this meristematic tissue, उन cells का क्या होगा? The cells are going to lose their ability to divide and they are going to take up a specific function. So since they are losing their ability to divide, they form a permanent tissue. क्या form करेंगे? They are going to form a permanent tissue. And yes ma'am. Okay, so this meristematic tissues, what are they going to do? They have to they take up the specific role and they lose their ability to divide here, and as a result they form a permanent tissue. What do they form? They form a permanent tissue, and this process of taking up This format of taking up a permanent shape and size as well as a function, we call this process as differentiation. And once we have this differentiation, it is going to lead to development of various types of permanent tissue, and this is how various different kinds of permanent tissues they develop. Okay. So this is how the permanent tissue has been formed by the cells of the meristematic tissue itself. Okay, and the process of taking up a permanent shape, ठीक है, process of taking up a permanent shape, size and function, we call this process as differentiation. क्या बोलेंगे हम इस process को? Differentiation process. And once we have this differentiation, it is going to lead so that development of various types of permanent tissues occur. Differentiation leads to what? Differentiation leads to development of various types of permanent tissue. Okay, now see, this is the activity 6.2 which has been given. What you need to do is, आपको एक plant का stem लेना है, and with the help of your teacher you need to cut that into very thin slices or section. What is to be done is, we need to take a plant stem and we need to cut that stem into thin slices or section. Okay. So after cutting into thin slices, we have to stain that slice with safranin solution. If you remember, when we were discussing on cell, that time also we had done the experiment on the roots, right? So वहाँ पे we have stained that with safranin, and here also we are using safranin solution only. Okay. So So here what you are going to do after making this, like after making a thin slice of the stem, you have to stain that with saffron. You have to place that on the glass slide, right? I hope you remember. Glass slide पे रखोगे, उस पे saffron डालोगे, and then you are going to put a drop of glycerine. What are you going to add? You're going to add a drop of glycerine there. Okay. उसके बाद you have to cover that with a cover slip and you have to observe it under a microscope. तो आपने ये प्लांट स्टेम को स्टेन किया सेफ्रानिन से, यू एडेड अ ड्रॉप ऑफ ग्लिसरीन एंड नाउ you have to observe that under a microscope. Okay, so observe the various types of cells and their arrangement which you can see in that plant stem. Abhi, this is what you are going to see the stem under the microscope. The structure of the stems look like this. Okay, so here you have to observe the different types of cells which you can see and how the cells are been arranged. Okay, and you have to compare it with this figure which has been given here in your textbook. So now you have to answer the following on the basis of your observation which you can see. Okay, now if I have to explain you, like, are all cells similar in structure? Okay, so like these are less specialized tissues which are made up of similar types of cell. Okay, so how many types of cells we can see here? We have simple permanent tissue, complex permanent tissue, and they also have different types of cells. Okay, so we'll see what all kinds of cells do we have here. Okay, and the third question is, can we think of reason why there will be so many types of cell? And what else you can do is, we can also try to cut the section of the plant root like we have done for stem. Even we can take a plant root and we can cut that section of the roots and stems of different plants, and we can go on with our observation. Okay, so अभी हम जब observe करेंगे plant stem का, the slide that we have made, we are going to see different types of cells which are present in the cross section. Okay, so see, remember this thing, that a plant consists of different types of tissue. Plant के पास क्या होता है? Plant has different types of tissue, and when we put them on the microscopic slide, we can easily see them and we can distinguish those from each other. So we have different types of cells. Like simple permanent tissue mein we have parenchyma, we have collenchyma, we have sclerenchyma, and complex permanent tissue mein we have xylem and phloem which has been present. So I'll just write it on the screen so that you get an idea. Agar if you have missed, like I have explained you all in detail about this in the first part itself, but then too I'll write it here since it is related to this activity. I'll write it on the screen. Okay. So we have simple permanent tissue, and this simple permanent tissue, it includes what? It includes parenchyma, it includes collenchyma, and it includes sclerenchyma. Okay, so these are the three different types of simple permanent tissue which you can say. So agar if I talk about parenchyma, see, parenchyma jo hai, if you can see here in the diagram, it is easily visible here. It is labeled as parenchyma tissue, right? So parenchyma, these are hexagonal flat loosely packed cell, and parenchyma क्या करता है? Parenchyma stores the food. So the storage of the food occurs in this parenchyma, which are loosely packed cells. Okay. So agar parenchyma it has chlorophyll, we can call them as chlorenchyma. अगर parenchyma के पास chlorophyll होगा तो हम उसको क्या बोल सकते हैं? We can call it as chlorenchyma. And if in aquatic plants they have big vacuoles which are present, then that big vacuoles in the parenchyma, they can provide them with buoyancy, and we can call that big vacuoles which are present in the parenchyma as erenchyma. So here we got two more terms, chlorenchyma, and secondly we have an erenchyma. तो chlorenchyma कब बोलेंगे हम parenchyma को? If it has chlorophyll. And erenchyma कब बोलेंगे हम parenchyma को? If it has vacuole inside it. Okay. Then second about collenchyma, if I say, so this, see, parenchyma में was जब उसके पास chlorophyll होगा, you are going to call it as chlorenchyma. अब ये है collenchyma. Collenchyma जो है, can you see this collenchyma which has been given here? Collenchyma. So this is elongated, irregularly thickened cell. क्या है ये? Collenchyma are elongated, irregularly thickened cell with low intracellular spaces. Can you see the intracellular space is very much low in collenchyma? And ये collenchyma जो है, that gives support to the plant. Example, you can consist of collenchyma as tendrils and stem of a climber. किसी भी climber का tendril या उसका stem. And next we have is sclerenchyma. Now this sclerenchyma, if you can see sclerenchyma, where it is? Now sclerenchyma is not labeled here, but sclerenchyma, they are also elongated thickened cell, and that sclerenchyma has lignified wall, and there will be no intracellular space which will be present there, but instead there are some dead cells which are present in this sclerenchyma, and those dead cells are going to provide strength as well as protection to the plant. क्या देंगे ये? Strength as well as protection to the plant. Example, coir of coconut. Okay. After that, the second type of tissue that we have, that permanent tissue that we have, is complex permanent tissue. So I'll write the name of this complex permanent tissue as well. So complex permanent tissue includes xylem, which conducts water, and secondly we have phloem. So this phloem, it conducts food to different parts of the plant. Okay, so these are the two different types of complex permanent tissue that we have. Now see, the complex permanent tissue that we are having. So this complex permanent tissue, it contains different types of cells, and this different type of cells are combined and they are performing a specific function there. So we have xylem. Can you see xylem, how it has been, how does it look like? So this is the xylem. So this xylem are water conducting tissues of the plant. As I wrote that it conducts water, right? So xylem is the water conducting tissue of the plant, which consist of xylem fiber. क्या होता है xylem के पास? Xylem fiber होता है. It has tracheates, vessels, xylem parenchyma cells. Okay, and the tracheids and vessels that I am talking about, they are going to have a tubular structure, and this tubular structure, it conducts water, while जो xylem का fiber होता है, that provides the support, and parenchyma, it is going to store the food. Okay, then secondly, the complex permanent tissue that we are having, that is phloem. Now phloem क्या करता है? Phloem conducts food, right? So food conducting tissue of the plant is phloem, and this phloem has sieve cells, sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem fibers, and phloem parenchyma cells. So these are the different types of cells which are present in this phloem. तो जो food होता है, because it is conducting food, right? So the food is going to pass through the long conductive tube, which is called as the sieve cells and the sieve tube. Okay, and the companion cell which is present in the phloem, that assist them in the transport, while the fiber cells which are present, they are going to provide support, and parenchyma is going to provide food to them. Okay, तो जितने भी fibrous cells है, they are dead cells, and they are going to only provide, they are going to be supportive and they are present for supportive and protective purpose only. Okay, now see, we have simple permanent tissue to discuss on, and see, a few layer of cell beneath the epidermis, they are generally simple permanent tissue. Simple permanent tissue क्या होता है? Few layer of cell that we are having just below the epidermis. ठीक है? Epidermis के नीचे का जो few layer of cell होता है, those are simple permanent tissue. Okay, and parenchyma is the most common simple permanent tissue that we are having. Now this can be asked for 1 marks. Dash is the most common simple permanent tissue. So we should know that parenchyma is the most common simple permanent tissue, and this parenchyma, it consists of relatively unspecialized cells within the thin cell wall. Now एक चीज याद रखो, parenchyma जो है, parenchyma टिश्यू के अंदर सारे लिविंग सेल्स प्रेजेंट होंगे, बट the cells are going to be unspecialized. ठीक है, parenchyma के cells कैसे होंगे? They are going to be unspecialized, and unspecialized तो है ही, but the cell wall that they are going to have is going to be thin. So they have a thin cell wall, and they have an unspecialized cell which is present, which are going to be the living cells. Okay, so they are usually loosely arranged, and thus large spaces between the cells, that is intracellular spaces, are found in this tissue. Now because these cells are loosely arranged, you will see कि वहाँ पे there are large spaces which are present between the cells, and we can find that in the tissue. So this tissue generally stores what? Food. ठीक है, simple permanent tissue जिसका example है parenchyma. What does it does? It just simply stores the food. So the first diagram that you can see, this is of parenchyma, where you can see that there are intracellular spaces which are present in the parenchyma. Okay, then we have collenchyma. This is the collenchyma tissue, and you can see the cell wall, vacuole, nucleus, and the wall thickening. What kind of wall thickening is present in collenchyma? Okay, the third one, is the sclerenchyma, and this is a transverse section of the sclerenchyma, and this is the longitudinal section of the sclerenchyma. So both things you should know. When it is having a transverse section of sclerenchyma, it is going to have a thick lignified wall. Okay, but when it has a longitudinal section of sclerenchyma, you will see that there will be a narrow lumen which is present, and there will be a lignified thick wall which will be present in both the things, in both the type, whether it is a transverse section or it is a longitudinal section. The wall is going to be thick. Okay. Now see, in some situations, it contains chlorophyll and it performs synthesis. Now I have already told you these things कि कुछ situations में क्या होता है, अगर आप देख रहे हो कि हमारे permanent tissue के पास chlorophyll है and now it is performing photosynthesis, then we call it as sclerenchyma. अगर photosynthesis है, chlorophyll present है, photosynthesis हो रहा है, then we call that as sclerenchyma. और अगर हम aquatic plants की बात करें, then the aquatic plants, they have large air cavities which are present in the parenchyma, and this helps them to float. So such a parenchyma type which is able to float because of this large air cavity, we call it as erenchyma. So we have sclerenchyma if chlorophyll is present. If large air cavities are present, we call it as erenchyma. Okay. Now whatever kind of flexibility that we can see in that plant, it is because of the another permanent tissue which is present, and that another permanent tissue is called as collenchyma. Okay, so collenchyma क्या करता है? Collenchyma is going to allow, we all know that the various parts of the plants, they bend, right? So bending कौन allow करता है? The bending of various parts of the plants like tendrils and the stems of climbers without breaking, that is being allowed by the collenchyma itself. So in short we can say that collenchyma, it provides the mechanical support. Collenchyma क्या करता है? Mechanical support provide करता है. Okay, so we can find this tissue in the leaf stalks below the epidermis. तो हमें ये collenchyma कहाँ पे मिलेगा? Leaf stalk के नीचे मिलेगा, below the epidermis. Okay, and the cells of the tissue, they are living, elongated and irregularly thickened at the corner. Collenchyma के cells कैसे होंगे? The cells of collenchyma are going to be living, they will be elongated, and they will be having an irregularly thickened, irregularly thickened at the corner. And if you can see the diagram, the intracellular space is not present, so they have very less intracellular space, very little intracellular space which has been present. And yet another type of permanent tissue. So first type was sclerenchyma, second type was collenchyma, third type is what? Sclerenchyma. Sclerenchyma is also a type of permanent tissue that we have, right? So sclerenchyma जो है, it makes the plant hard and stiff. Okay, so you have seen the husk of a coconut, right? So that husk of the coconut is made of this sclerenchymatous tissue, and that is why coconut का जो outer part होता है, that is very much hard and stiff. Okay, so the cells of these tissues are dead. Sclerenchymatous tissue का cells कैसा होता है? They are dead. They are going to be narrow and long as the walls are thickened due to lignin which is being present there. So of these walls which are so thick, there is no internal space which is present inside the cell. Cell के अंदर कोई भी internal space present नहीं होगा, and this tissue is present in stem around the vascular bundle. तो ये sclerenchymus tissue कहाँ पे present होता है? Stem के यहाँ पे present होगा, around the vascular bundle, in the veins of the leaves and in the hard covering of the seeds and nuts as well. तो sclerenchyma का काम क्या है? To provide hardness and stiffness to the plant, as well as it is going to provide strength to the plant part. क्या provide करेगा? It is going to provide strength to the plant part. Okay. I hope you are clear with these three types now. We have parenchyma, simple permanent tissue में we have parenchyma, we have collenchyma, and we have sclerenchyma. And I hope you are clear with the characteristics as well. Now this is the structure of sclerenchyma which has been given. The first one is transverse section of sclerenchyma, and the second one is longitudinal structure of sclerenchyma. Now this activity 3 and the complex permanent tissue, Let's see if we can complete it now itself. See, now this we have this activity 6.3. We need to take a freshly plucked leaf of royo. क्या लेना है आपको? एक freshly leaf लेना है of this royo. You have to stretch that and you have to break it by applying pressure. अब आप ये leaf को क्या करोगे? Stretch करोगे and you have to break that leaf by applying pressure. Okay? तो जब आप उसको break करोगे, you have to keep it stretched gently so that some peel or skin that projects out from the cut. अब आप उसको gently stretch out करना है ताकि कुछ peel और उसका skin जो है that should come out of the cut that you have made. Okay? Now remove this peel and put it in a petri dish which is filled with water. अभी आप क्या करोगे? वो पील को निकालो और उसको एक पेट्री डिश के अंदर डालो एंड वो पेट्री डिश के अंदर वाटर होना चाहिए. नाउ ऐड फ्यू ड्रॉप्स ऑफ सेफ्रॉन इनटू इट, वेट फॉर फ्यू मिनट्स एंड देन यू हैव टू ट्रांसफर दैट ऑन टू अ स्लाइड. तो अभी आपने जो सेफ्रॉन डाला है वो आप स्लाइड पे नहीं डालोगे एज यू आर डूइंग इट फॉर अदर एक्सपेरिमेंट्स या एक्टिविटीज. हियर यू हैव टू ऐड द सेफ्रॉन बिफोर हैंड ओनली इन द पेट्री डिश इटसेल्फ. ओके, उसके बाद आप उसको स्लाइड पे डालोगे, उसके ऊपर कवर स्लिप डालोगे एंड देन you have to observe that under a microscope. Okay, तो आप यहाँ पे क्या observe करोगे? You know, this is the diagram of the epidermal cell, guard cell and the epidermal cell. So A is the lateral view, this is the lateral view of the guard cell and the epidermal cell, and this B1 is the surface view. This is the guard cell and this is the stoma which has been present. Okay, so what are you going to observe is, you are going to observe flat epidermal cells and few stomatal cells. क्या देखने मिलेगा आपको? epidermal cells and stomatal cells देखने मिलेगा. So royo जो है ना, the plant that I am talking about, that is a common ornamental plant. Okay, so इसका leaf जो है we can easily peel it off and we can observe it under the microscope. You will see that there is a thin layer which consists of epidermal cell. Thin layer पे क्या होगा? There will be a epidermal cell and this epidermal cells, they are flat cell. एपिडर्मल सेल्स के पास इंट्रासेल्युलर स्पेसेस नहीं होता, वेरी लो इंट्रासेल्युलर स्पेस होता है एंड दे हैव अ थिक सेल वॉल विच इज प्रेजेंट एंड एज वेल एज यू विल सी कि उसके अंदर स्मॉल स्मॉल पोर्स प्रेजेंट होंगे जिनको हम बोलते हैं स्टोमा. कैन यू सी द स्मॉल पोर्स विच आर प्रेजेंट इनसाइड? दे आर कॉल्ड एज स्टोमा एंड दिस स्टोमा इज प्रेजेंट फॉर एक्सचेंजिंग द वेपर्स एंड गैसेस. स्टोमा क्या करता है? इट एक्सचेंजेस द वेपर्स एंड द गैसेस. And can you see this two bean shaped guard cells? ये bean shaped क्या है? They are the guard cells who are going to regulate. Guard cells का काम क्या है? They regulate the opening and closing of the stomata. क्या करेंगे वो? Opening and closing को regulate करते हैं stomata की. Okay, so when you perform this experiment of Rio, which is an ornamental plant, you will see this. What you observe is the outermost layer of the cell which is called as epidermis. क्या observe करोगे आप? Epidermis, which is the outermost layer of the cell. Okay, अभी ये epidermis जो है वो एक single layer of cell से बनता है. किससे बनता है epidermis? It is made up of single layer of cell and if you find it in some plant, in some plants who are living in very dry habitat, अगर आपको कोई ऐसा plant मिल गया है जो बहुत ज़्यादा dry habitat में मिलता है, उनका एपिडर्मिस जो है दैट इज गोइंग टू बी थिकर. व्हाई थिकर? बिकॉज दे हैव प्रोटेक्शन अगेंस्ट वाटर लॉस. द प्रोटेक्शन दैट दे आर हैविंग दैट अगेंस्ट दिस वाटर लॉस इज वेरी मच क्रिटिकल. ओके, एंड दिस occurs only in the dry habitat. Okay, so the entire surface of the water that has an outer covering which we call it as an epidermis. तो पूरा जो entire surface है water का, उसके पास क्या होता है? एक आउटर कवरिंग होती है जिसको हम बोलते हैं एपिडर्मिस. अभी एपिडर्मिस क्या करता है? एपिडर्मिस इट प्रोटेक्ट्स ऑल द पार्ट्स ऑफ द प्लांट. जितने भी प्लांट के पार्ट्स है उसको प्रोटेक्ट कौन करता है? एपिडर्मिस, विच इज द आउटर मोस्ट लेयर ऑफ द सेल. ओके, सो द एपिडर्मल सेल्स ऑन द एरियल पार्ट ऑफ द प्लांट, अभी जो एपिडर्मल सेल्स है वो क्या सिक्रीट करते हैं? दे सिक्रीट अ वैक्सी वाटर रेजिस्टेंट लेयर ऑन द आउटर सरफेस. क्या सिक्रीट करेंगे? एक वैक्सी वाटर रेजिस्टेंट लेयर सिक्रीट करेंगे आउटर सरफेस पे एंड दिस लेयर इज गोइंग टू प्रोटेक्ट, लाइक इट इज गोइंग टू गिव प्रोटेक्शन अगेंस्ट लॉस ऑफ वाटर, मैकेनिकल इंजरी एंड इन्वेजन बाय द पैरासिटिक फंगाई. तो ये तीनों चीज़ों से प्रोटेक्शन देंगे कौन? The secretion which is being secreted by the epidermal cell. So they're going to protect against loss of water, mechanical injury, as well as invasion by the parasitic fungi. So this epidermal cells, they have a protective role to play, as well as the cells of this epidermal tissue, they are going to form a continuous layer. क्या form करेंगे वो? Continuous layer form करेंगे without any intracellular spaces. Can you see any kind of intracellular space that exists? No, right? So they are having a continuous layer without any intracellular space. Okay, so most of the epidermal cells, they are almost relatively flat. Often their outer and the side walls, they are going to be thicker than the inner wall. Inner wall से thicker जो है उनका, ठीक है, उनका जो ये होगा, what can we say, inner wall, that is going to be thicker than the outer side walls. Okay, so we can observe small pores here, and there in the epidermis of the leaf. अब जब आप leaf का epidermis देखोगे, आपको वहाँ पे small pores दिखेंगे, and we call that pores as stomata. क्या बोलेंगे? Stomata. Now stomata जो है, that is enclosed by a bean shaped kidney. And can you see this bean shaped kidney? That is called as the guard cell. अब guard cell का काम क्या है? Guard cell is going to regulate the opening and closing of the stomata, and we have this transpiration process, that is loss of water in the form of water vapor, that takes place through stomata. Stomata के through क्या होता है? Transpiration process होता है, that is the loss of water takes place in the form of water vapor through this stomata. Okay, now see this. Epidermal cells of the root whose function is water absorption. अभी जो हमारा root का epidermal cell है, अभी obvious सी बात है, because it is the epidermal cell of the root, and root का one of the function is absorption of the water, right? So here the epidermal cells का function is water absorption, where commonly bearing long hair-like parts that greatly increase the total absorptive surface area. So that long hair part of the plant is going to increase the absorptive surface area which has been present there. Okay, so in some plants like desert plants mein what happens, epidermis is going to have a thick waxy coating of cutin. क्या होता है epidermis पे? Thick waxy coating of cutin, which is called as a chemical substance with waterproof quality, जो उसके outer surface पे present है. Now can you think of this reason why there is a chemical substance with waterproof quality? And is the outer layer of the branch of tree that is different from the outer layer of the young stem? What do you think so? Because here what happens is, जैसे जैसे the plant is growing older, the outer protective tissue that it is having, that protective tissue is going to change, and there will be a strip of secondary meristem which is located in the cortex. They are going to form layers of cell, and that layers of cell, it forms the cork. Can you see this cork cells which have been present, and these are the ruptured epidermis which are present on the top. Okay, so the cells of the cork, they are going to be dead and compactly arranged without any intracellular spaces. If you can see here, they are compactly arranged cells, and there is no intracellular space which is present between them. So they also have a substance which is called as suberin. यहाँ पे क्या होता है? They have a substance called as suberin which is present in their wall, and that suberin, it makes them impervious to gases as well as water. So ये suberin क्या करता है? It makes this protective tissue impervious to gas as well as water. Now the second type of permanent tissue that we have is xylem and phloem, but this complex tissue we will discuss in the next part. So now we have completed with the simple permanent tissue, where we have three types: parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. So these are three important types of simple permanent tissue that we have discussed today. Next part mein we are going to discuss on this complex permanent tissue. Like it includes xylem and phloem. Xylem conducts water, phloem conducts food. So I hope you are cleared with this simple permanent tissue at least. Okay, so there were many activities as well which we have discussed, right? Now in the next class we are going to start with this animal tissue as well, which are of four different types. So we have epithelial tissue to discuss in detail, Then we have connective tissue to discuss in detail. Okay, so blood, bone, these are some of the most important type of connective tissue that we are having. So we're going to discuss that in the next class. After that, the third type of animal tissue that we have is called as the muscular tissue, and the fourth type that we have is called as the nervous tissue. So these are the four important types of you can say animal tissue that we are going to discuss on in the next class. Okay, after that we will be discussing on the summary, what exactly we have learned in this lesson after completing this animal tissue, and you will get an idea ki what exactly the lesson was all about. Okay, and after that we have 14 questions to discuss. So I'll just tell you the questions. First of all, you need to define the term tissue. Then you need to write the types of elements which are together making up the xylem tissue, and you have to name them. Then you need to write how are this simple tissue, they are different from the complex tissue in plant. After that we are going to differentiate between parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma on the basis of the cell wall that they are having. उसके बाद we are going to write the function of stomata. क्या लिखेंगे हम? We are going to write the function of the stomata, and then we are going to diagrammatically show the difference that exists between the three different types of the muscle fibers that exist. Okay, after that we will be writing the specific function of the cardiac muscle. Then we will be differentiating between the striated muscle, unstriated muscle, cardiac muscle, and here we will be considering the structure and the location that they are present in the body. Then we will be labeling, we will be drawing a well labeled diagram of a neuron. Neuron includes axon, then it has dendrites and the cell body. So we'll be labeling that as well. Then this is the name the following. Then we are going to identify the type of tissue which is present in the skin, bark of the tree, bone, lining of the kidney tubule and the vascular bundle. We will be naming the region which is present, in which the parenchyma tissue is present. Then we will be writing the role of epidermis in plants. Then we will be writing how does the cork it act as a protective tissue, and then we will be completing this chart of the permanent tissue. So I hope whatever we have discussed about the simple permanent tissue in this part is being clear to you. Now the rest of the part for this lesson tissue, we are going to continue with that in the next part. Okay, so we are left with complex permanent tissue and the animal tissue. We'll cover that in the next part. Okay, thank you everyone.